My life with Robert was, for all intents and purposes, perfect. From the outside anyway. We lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs, had good jobs, he was in investment consulting, whatever that exactly meant on a day-to-day basis, and I worked remotely doing project coordination for a tech firm. We took nice vacations, hosted dinner parties, and by all accounts, we were the couple who had it all figured out. People envied us. I envied us sometimes too, or at least the version of us I saw reflected in their eyes. The reality was quieter. Robert had a charm he could turn on like a spotlight, dazzling everyone in his vicinity. At home, though, the light often felt dim. He was frequently preoccupied, glued to his phone, stressed about deals that were always just about to close, or just not fully present. I chalked it up to the pressures of his high-stakes job. Marriage wasn't always a fairy tale, right? It was partnership, compromise, weathering the quiet spells. Our 10th anniversary was approaching. 10 years. A decade felt monumental. Robert announced he'd planned a surprise trip, somewhere remote and romantic, just the two of us. A chance to reconnect, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that used to melt my heart. I was genuinely touched. Maybe this was what we needed. A reset. A few days later, he asked me to find a specific old file in his home office, something about a property deed from years ago, buried in his archive boxes. It seemed tedious, but I was happy to help. As I sifted through dusty folders, I found a small, sleek USB drive tucked inside a hollowed-out book spine. It wasn't labeled. Curiosity, or maybe that subtle nagging unease I'd always pushed down, got the better of me. I plugged it into my laptop in the kitchen while he was out. It was encrypted, but I knew Robert's standard 4-digit code, our anniversary date. Inside, I found a series of files labeled with cryptic codes. Opening one, I stared at screen grabs of encrypted messages. My blood ran cold. It started with conversations clearly detailing an affair. "Can't wait for Eleanor to be gone," one message read. "Once she's out of the picture, everything is simpler." My stomach dropped, but that wasn't the worst. As I scrolled, the context shifted from infidelity to something far more sinister. They discussed the anniversary trip. "The Scottish Highlands plan is perfect," one message from Robert read. "Remote. No signal. She'll be miles from anywhere. Make it look like she went hiking and got lost. The paperwork is filed. The insurance payout covers everything once she's declared gone." They included David and Matthew, Robert's closest friends. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a cruel divorce plot. This was about erasure. My life, my existence, tied up in some dark financial scheme I knew nothing about. They were planning to abandon me, potentially to die, and profit from it. The world tilted. The perfect kitchen, the sun streaming through the window, the sound of birds singing outside. It all felt grotesquely wrong, a beautiful stage set for a horror show. My hands trembled so hard I could barely close the laptop. Disbelief warred with a bone-deep terror. How could the man I loved, built a life with, be capable of this? And my friends, David and Matthew, plotting with him? But amidst the shock and terror, a hard, cold core of clarity formed. I wouldn't crumble. I wouldn't let them win. Their plan, designed to destroy me, was now my blueprint for escape. I carefully saved the most incriminating files to a hidden cloud storage account I maintained separately, then deleted them from the USB and re-encrypted it. I placed the USB back exactly where I found it. By the time Robert came home, I was just finishing up in the office, wiping down surfaces. I greeted him with a smile, one that felt brittle and fake but apparently convincing enough. He kissed my forehead, oblivious. Inside, a storm raged, but on the surface, the facade was perfect. I knew I had to play along. I had to be smarter, colder, and more decisive than I had ever been in my life. Maintaining the facade was agony. Every meal shared with Robert, every conversation about the upcoming trip, felt like a performance on the edge of a precipice. He talked about scenic hikes and remote cottages, pointing them out on maps, completely unaware that I was listening, cataloging every detail not with romantic anticipation, but with grim strategic planning. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of their cruelty. A few nights later, David and Matthew came over for drinks. Robert made a show of sending me to fetch snacks from the kitchen, giving them time alone on the patio. This was my chance. I crept to the dining room window, staying below the sill, the cool evening air doing nothing to calm my racing heart. Their voices, slightly slurred from the expensive scotch Robert was serving, drifted through the open door. "Are you sure about this, Rob?" That was David, sounding slightly uneasy, but the tone was weak, easily dismissed. "It's the only way, mate," Robert replied, his voice low and intense. "The Geller deal went south. Way south. I'm leveraged to the hilt. Her insurance policy is substantial, kicks in fast if she's, well, you know. And no messy divorce trying to hide assets. The trip is perfect cover. Remote. Makes it look like an accident. Who goes hiking alone in those places without telling anyone? Just feels a bit much," Matthew mumbled. "Too much," Robert scoffed. "Or too clever. By the time anyone even thinks to look properly, she'll be gone. They'll assume hypothermia, a fall, anything but this. And who's going to connect us to some random disappearance in the middle of nowhere?" Right. Just remember the details. Disable her phone properly. Make sure there are no witnesses when you drop her," David added, his earlier hesitation replaced by practical complicity. "Make sure she has no cash, no way to get help easily." They laughed then, a chilling sound that confirmed they were fully committed to destroying me. They weren't just enabling him, they were active participants. My friends. My husband. Plotting my death like it was a business transaction. I sank back against the wall, tears silently streaming down my face, but there was no time for despair. Their cruelty fueled me. I wiped my face and returned with the snacks. My smile fixed, my hands steady. "Everything all right?" I asked, my voice light. "Just talking business, sunshine," Robert said, winking. I wanted to scream. That night, I began to move. Methodically. Stealthily. I converted a small, separate inheritance my grandmother had left me, held in a different type of account Robert didn't track, into a mix of readily accessible cash and a prepaid Visa card I bought online and had delivered to a P.O. box I rented across town weeks ago for online shopping returns. I sold a few pieces of antique jewelry I owned before the marriage, using an online consignment shop that specialized in anonymity. I carefully gathered my passport, birth certificate, and other essential documents, scanning copies and storing them in the hidden cloud drive. I bought a burner phone and cheap laptop using cash from the P.O. Box funds, activating them using public Wi-Fi hotspots far from my house. I researched the Scottish Highlands region Robert had mentioned, specifically the remote areas David had talked about. I cross-referenced potential hiking routes with public transport schedules and sparse road networks. I identified key points or a small village miles away, a specific bus line that ran twice a day, a remote road junction that might have a faint cell signal, or be a potential pickup point for a pre-book service. I downloaded offline maps and marked these points. I found a rural ride-sharing service that operated in the general area and discreetly set up an account using my burner number and a temporary email, pre-booking a ride from a specific, remote road junction for a window of time the day we were scheduled to be in that area, offering a substantial cash bonus to ensure they showed up and didn't ask questions. This was the riskiest part of the plan, relying on a small chance of success, but it was my best shot. I also researched creating a new identity using my maiden name, potentially adding a middle name, researching how to explain gaps in employment or residency. I bought basic, practical clothing suitable for travel and blending in jeans, plain tops, a baseball cap, and packed them into a small, nondescript backpack I could carry easily. I also tucked away a small canister of pepper spray, legal for personal defense, into an easily accessible pocket in my backpack, a non-lethal deterrent, just in case. I sewed $20 bills into the lining of my jacket and the sole of my sturdy walking boots, emergency cash they would never find. I packed a separate small bag of trip essentials exactly as Robert instructed, light clothing, hiking boots, a small day pack. Everything else, my life, my real plan, was hidden. There were several close calls, Robert asking why I needed cash, David commenting on my sudden interest in maps. I deflected, lied, smiled. The performance was exhausting, but the thought of escaping their trap fueled me. The morning of the trip, I felt a chilling calm. I made Robert's favorite breakfast, pancakes with strawberries. He was in a great mood, whistling as he packed the car. "Ready for our adventure, sunshine?" he asked, kissing me. "Couldn't be more ready," I replied, the truth hidden in my carefully measured words. The journey was long. A flight to Edinburgh, then a smaller regional flight, followed by a rental car driven by Robert, with David and Matthew joining us. They were boisterous, laughing, pointing out scenery. For hours, I sat in the back seat, watching the rugged Scottish landscape roll by, my heart a cold knot in my chest. As we drove deeper into the Highlands, the towns disappeared, cell signal vanished, and the roads became narrow, winding tracks. My research paid off. I recognized landmarks, knew we were heading towards the desolate area I'd identified. We parked the car beside a small, unmarked trail leading into thick woods. "Okay, romantic hike time," Robert announced, too cheerfully. "Sun's out, perfect day." "We'll just take the essentials," Matthew said, grabbing my small day pack from the car. "Anything else is just dead weight." "Leave your phones too," David added. "No signal anyway, and you don't want to drop them off a cliff edge." He took my phone and Robert's from the center console. Robert gave me a quick, dismissive kiss on the cheek. "Ready, Elle?" My hands felt cold, but my mind was sharp. This was it. The moment. "Ready," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. We walked for about 20 minutes. The trail was barely visible, overgrown and muddy. We stopped at a small clearing overlooking a steep, tree-covered ravine. It was beautiful, remote, utterly isolated. "All right," Robert said, turning to me, his smile gone, replaced by a cold, hard expression I'd never seen directed at me before. David and Matthew stood behind him, their faces grim. "I don't understand," I said, feigning confusion, my voice trembling slightly. Robert stepped closer, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "It's simple, Eleanor. We're leaving you here." My carefully constructed confusion faltered for just a second. "What? Why?" "Your excess baggage," Matthew sneered, holding Robert back. "It's nothing personal," David added, shrugging. "Just business." Robert's eyes were like ice. "Don't try to find your way back. Don't try to contact anyone. Just disappear. It'll be easier for everyone." He turned, not looking back. "Let's go." They walked away without a backward glance. 3 figures disappearing into the trees, their silence louder than any shouting. I stood there for a full minute, making sure they were truly gone, waiting until the sound of their footsteps faded entirely. Then the act dropped. The trembling stopped. My face hardened. I wasn't wearing the carefully chosen hiking boots. They were in the car. I was wearing sturdy, worn-in walking shoes. Reaching down, I quickly untied the laces of my right shoe and extracted the $20 bill sewn into the tongue. Not much, but a start. I checked my left jacket pocket. The cash sewn in the lining was still there. My hand went to my other pocket, finding the small, cheap burner phone and the pepper spray. I looked around. My research had been good. I knew the general direction of the road junction I needed to reach. It was miles away, through dense woods and difficult terrain. I wasn't a seasoned hiker, but I was determined. I used the offline map on the burner phone to confirm my location and plot the most direct, but not most obvious route to the road. I left my discarded trip essentials bag near the trail, a small false flag they might see later, suggesting I'd gone deeper into the woods. Then I started walking. Fast. Not following the trail they'd brought me on, but bushwhacking through the less dense parts of the woods, making my own path. The fear was a sharp spur, pushing me forward. The anger was a cold fire, burning away exhaustion. Hours later, scratched and aching, I reached the remote, paved road. It was deserted. Just as I'd researched, this road eventually led to the junction I needed. I checked my watch. I was cutting it close to the pickup window I'd booked. I started walking along the road, praying for a signal or for the rideshare to show up. The air was cold, the silence vast. Doubt crept in. Had my plan been too audacious? What if the driver didn't come? Just as despair started to set in, a small, dusty car appeared in the distance and slowed as it approached the junction I was nearing. It pulled over. The driver, a young man who looked slightly confused but professional, matched the description from the app. "Eleanor?" he asked hesitantly, using the temporary name I'd provided. "Yes, that's me." Thank you for coming," I said, my voice rough with relief. "I got in quickly." He glanced at my dirty clothes, scratched face, but didn't ask questions. "Where to?" he asked. "Nearest train station with service to Edinburgh," I replied, handing him the agreed-upon cash plus the bonus. He nodded, and we drove away, leaving the desolate landscape behind. The first hurdle cleared. I leaned back in the seat, finally allowing myself a shaky breath. I had done it. I was free. Getting from a regional train station in Scotland to London required multiple connections and careful timing. I used my burner phone only when absolutely necessary, relying on the cash and prepaid card. Every ticket purchased, every station navigated, felt like a victory. I slept fitfully on overnight trains, clutching my small backpack, jumping at sudden noises. The fear of being found was a constant companion, a cold knot in my stomach. I imagined Robert reporting me missing, the police looking, them realizing I hadn't just vanished but had escaped. When I finally arrived at King's Cross Station in London, I was exhausted, dirty, and utterly adrift. The sheer scale of the city was overwhelming after the desolate quiet of the Highlands. The noise, the crowds, the endless stream of people. It was anonymity, yes, but it was also profound isolation. My immediate priority was shelter and stretching my limited funds. I found a bed in a crowded, noisy hostel in a less than glamorous part of town. The rooms smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant, but it was a roof over my head. I lived on cheap instant noodles and bread, walking miles to save on transport. I used internet cafes or the library's free Wi-Fi to research job openings, accommodation, and how to get around. Finding work under a fabricated history proved incredibly difficult. My resume was deliberately vague, hiding my real experience to protect my identity. Without references, I was limited to cash-in-hand jobs. I cleaned offices late at night, waited tables in greasy spoons where they didn't ask for papers, did odd jobs found on community boards. The work was physically draining and emotionally draining, a stark contrast to the comfortable life I'd led. There were moments of deep despair, sitting alone in my tiny temporary room, wondering if I could truly build a new life from nothing. It was while working as a cleaner in a small local cafe that I met Sarah. She was from Eastern Europe, working 2 jobs to support her family back home. She saw me struggling, gaunt and tired, and offered me half of her sandwich one day. It was a small gesture, but it cracked through my carefully constructed shell of self-reliance. Sarah didn't ask questions about my past. She simply offered practical kindness. She showed me how to get a cheaper pay-as-you-go phone plan, where to find free community resources, and just listened patiently when I needed to talk about the general hardship of starting over, never revealing the true horror of my escape. She became my first real friend, a symbol of the unexpected human connection I found in the anonymity of the city. Despite the tough manual labor, I kept researching, kept looking for a way into something more stable, something that could leverage the skills I'd acquired over the years, even if I had to start at the bottom. My goal wasn't just survival anymore. It was to build a life they couldn't touch, a life that was undeniably mine, and one where my intelligence, not my vulnerability, was my greatest asset. My breakthrough came after months of scraping by. I saw an ad for a data verification assistant at a large financial firm in the city, City Point Financial. The requirements were minimal: attention to detail, basic computer skills. Crucially, they seemed more interested in processing large volumes quickly than scrutinizing backgrounds for entry-level roles. Using my slightly embellished temporary resume, I got the job. It was mind-numbingly dull work initially. Sitting in a cubicle, comparing data points, cross-referencing records, ensuring consistency. But I was inside. I kept my head down, stayed quiet, and followed instructions perfectly. While I performed the repetitive tasks, my mind was active. I watched the analysts and managers around me. I listened to the jargon, picked up on the flow of information, and used my lunch breaks not just to eat, but to read industry news websites, financial blogs, and even discarded reports I found in the recycling, always checking first, of course. My experience managing our complex household finances, plus Robert's vague discussions about his deals, had given me a surprising, if unstructured, understanding of financial concepts. My natural ability to spot patterns, once used for trivial things like predicting traffic flow or organizing closets, now had vast amounts of data to work with. The turning point happened while I was verifying a massive spreadsheet of international transactions for various clients. Most of it was standard, but I noticed a small, unusual series of transfers involving a specific offshore account, a less-known regulatory jurisdiction, and a sequence of seemingly unrelated company names. Individually, each data point was unremarkable, but the pattern felt wrong. It was a faint echo of the complexity I'd seen in Robert's hidden documents. I spent my evenings at the library, researching the companies, the jurisdiction, the transaction types. What I uncovered wasn't a simple error. It looked like a sophisticated, subtle attempt to bypass compliance checks or obfuscate the source of funds, possibly on behalf of a client. It was potentially illegal, or at least a major compliance risk for the firm. My heart pounded. This was more than just spotting a typo. This was significant. It could get me fired for looking where I shouldn't, or it could be my chance. I thought of Robert, of David and Matthew, confident that I was broken and gone. I wasn't. I was here, seeing things they couldn't. I didn't send an anonymous email. Instead, I put together a concise factual memo titled Potential Data Inconsistency Note, detailing only the pattern I observed, referencing the specific data points and regulations it might relate to, but without stating any conclusions or revealing the extent of my research. I left it on the desk of Mr. Davies, the compliance manager, early one morning before anyone arrived, knowing he was meticulous and would see it. For days, I waited terrified. Nothing happened. Then, Mr. Davies called me into his office. He looked tired, but his eyes held a new kind of interest. "Eleanor," he said using my new name. "About this note you left." My stomach clenched. "Yes, Mr. Davies? This inconsistency you pointed out, it led us to a much larger issue. A serious compliance risk we almost missed." He leaned back in his chair. "How did you even spot this?" "It was buried in layers of data." I shrugged, trying to appear humble but competent. "I just got lost in the numbers, I guess. Patterns stand out to me." Mr. Davies studied me for a long moment. "Your job is just data verification, Eleanor, not analysis." "I understand, sir," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But I saw something that didn't look right." He gave a small smile. "Indeed. You have a remarkable eye for detail, and for seeing what others miss." He paused. "This work you did, it's valuable. More valuable than verifying spreadsheets." He offered me a promotion. Junior Compliance Analyst. It involves more research, more complex datasets. "Are you interested?" A surge of pure elation went through me, quickly followed by fierce determination. This was it. This was my chance. "Yes, Mr. Davies," I said, meeting his gaze. "I would like that very much." My life changed rapidly after that. As a junior compliance analyst, I had access to more sophisticated tools and complex financial data. I devoured training materials, stayed late, and applied myself with relentless focus. The language of finance, once intimidating, became intuitive. Numbers told a story, and I was good at reading it. My confidence grew, both professionally and personally. I moved out of the hostel into a small but clean and safe studio apartment. Sarah cheered me on, amazed at my transformation. She was a constant reminder of the kindness I'd found in my lowest moments. City Point Financial began working to secure a new anchor client, Sebastian Blake. His name was legendary in global shipping and trade. His company was vast, complex, and incredibly wealthy. Winning his business would be a major coup for the firm. Due to my proven ability to untangle complex data and identify subtle risks or opportunities, I was assigned to the elite team tasked with analyzing his extensive financial holdings as part of the pitch process. It was a daunting task, but also the biggest opportunity of my career. I worked tirelessly, sifting through mountains of data related to Sebastian Blake's various ventures, subsidiaries, and investments around the globe. His financial empire was a labyrinth, but I found myself energized by the challenge. I met Sebastian Blake for the first time during a presentation our team gave to him and his key executives. He was taller than I expected, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent blue eyes. He had a quiet authority that commanded attention without being overbearing. While other analysts presented glossy summaries, I was responsible for the deep dive data analysis section, highlighting potential compliance issues and proposing strategies to optimize certain investment structures based on regulatory nuances I'd identified. I was nervous, but I focused on the data, presenting my findings clearly and concisely. Sebastian listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that showed he was following every detail. When I finished, he didn't immediately praise the senior analysts. He turned to me. "Miss Eleanor," he said using my new name, "your analysis of the Red Sky shipping data is particularly insightful. Connecting those foreign subsidiaries to the currency exchange patterns, most firms would have missed that entirely." My heart swelled with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Blake," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "It's just about paying attention to the details." He gave a slight smile. "Details are everything in this business." Over the following weeks and months, as CitiPoint Financial secured the account and began managing his portfolio, I interacted with Sebastian more frequently. Our conversations started strictly professional, focused on market trends, investment strategies, and compliance. But gradually, they evolved. He would ask about my thoughts on broader economic issues, my perspective on London, or simply how I was doing. He seemed genuinely interested in my mind, my opinions, my journey, though he knew nothing of the real journey. He treated me as an equal, a respected professional whose intellect he valued. It was a stark, healing contrast to the way Robert had dismissed and devalued me. Working closely with Sebastian Blake was both demanding and incredibly rewarding. I continued to excel, my confidence growing with each successful analysis and presentation. I wasn't just doing a job, I was building something significant. Sarah was incredibly proud. Though she just moved to a different city for better work opportunities, we stayed in touch. I had built a small, trusted circle of friends in London, people who knew the new Eleanor. Then came the day the past briefly resurfaced. I saw a small article online. Robert and David were facing investigation for financial fraud related to a failed business deal. Matthew wasn't mentioned. Perhaps he got away or wasn't as involved. It was a fleeting moment of grim satisfaction, seeing that their scheme had imploded without me. They had tried to erase me to fix their problems, and in the end, they hadn't succeeded, and their problems had found them anyway. It didn't bring me joy or a sense of revenge in the way I might have once imagined. It simply confirmed how far I had come and how utterly irrelevant they were to my life now. The true best life wasn't about seeing them fail, it was about my own triumph. My life with Sebastian had deepened beyond the professional. It was built on mutual respect, shared intellect, and a quiet, profound connection that had grown organically. He saw my strength, my resilience, my wit, and my capability. One evening, we were attending a charity gala on a beautiful yacht on the Thames, the lights of London glittering around us. It wasn't Sebastian's yacht, but the setting felt symbolic. I stood on the deck, a successful analyst, a woman building a genuine, fulfilling life, standing alongside a man who valued and respected me completely. I thought back to that desolate moment in the Scottish Highlands, the fear, the betrayal, the sheer uncertainty. I had been left there to disappear, broken and alone. Now I stood here unbroken, not alone and thriving. My escape, born of desperation and fear, had led me to a life I could never have dreamed of in the gilded cage of my marriage. I wasn't living my best life because I was with a billionaire. I was living my best life because I had saved myself, built my own foundation, and found someone who saw and cherished the strong, capable woman I had become. The past was a scar, a reminder of the darkness, but it no longer defined me. The future stretched before me, vast and bright, entirely mine to navigate.